"You've been arriving home late again," my wife Catherine remarked. Her tone was ambiguous, a blend of accusation and concern. 30 p.m. Late, but not exceptional. Not for a man striving to secure the prestigious Miller contract, a deal that could potentially double our business's revenue. "It's a significant project," I explained, scrubbing grease from beneath my fingernails. "You know how these things are." Catherine nodded. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She had been distant lately, distracted. Her phone consistently lay face down on surfaces, always within easy reach. She used to inquire about my day, eager to hear about both my triumphs and setbacks. Now, only the quiet scraping of her fork on her dinner plate, reheated for one, filled the silence. "Brian called." She answered casually, almost too casually. "He wanted to know if we were still planning on that barbecue this weekend," she said. I slowly dried my hands. Brian Miller, my closest friend since our early 20s, the godfather to our son, the steadfast companion who stood by me when my father passed away, when the bank nearly foreclosed on our initial equipment yard, and when Catherine suffered a miscarriage of our second child. "Certainly," I replied. "Tell him I'll bring the steaks." She offered a fleeting smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then glanced at her phone when it vibrated. She flipped it over, read a message, and her smile transformed, becoming genuine, tender, private. "Just Susan from our book club," she mentioned, although I hadn't asked. I nodded, and proceeded to the shower, a tightening feeling in my gut, the same sensation I'd experienced when Peterson Construction attempted to undermine our bid by employing cheaper equipment from Mexico, the same feeling I'd felt when the bank manager patronizingly addressed me as son, while explaining the rejection of our loan application. That gut feeling that whispered something is amiss. Pay close attention. Under the hot water, I pondered Brian's new pickup truck, Catherine's sudden enthusiasm for Thursday night book club meetings, and how they both seemed to find reasons to simultaneously check their phones during our most recent dinner. I had ignored these warning signs for weeks, perhaps months, but ignoring decay doesn't halt its insidious spread. I met Brian Miller at a construction site in 2008. He was the site supervisor. I was subcontracting the heavy equipment operation. We struck up a conversation about classic motorcycles during lunch, and by the project's completion, we were riding together on weekends. When I decided to launch Redwood Construction 3 years later, Brian was the first person I contacted. He invested $30,000, the majority of his savings, for a 15% stake, and never questioned my decisions, even when we barely broke even during those initial years. Catherine and I had already been married for 7 years by then. She had supported me when I was just an equipment operator, earning an hourly wage, when we lived in that cramped one-bedroom apartment with the perpetually leaky ceiling. She believed in my dream even when her parents dismissively labeled me a man with dirt under his nails, and nothing to show for it. A home. A son, David, now pursuing an engineering degree in college. A life where her parents eventually retracted their earlier criticisms at our 25th anniversary celebration. Her father conceding that I had done quite well after all while casting envious eyes on the lake house we had recently acquired. Brian was present for all of it. The bachelor party, serving as best man, and patiently waiting in the hospital room when David was born. The three of us, Catherine, Brian, and I, were a solid unit, an unbreakable triangle, or so I believed. The first significant crack appeared last Christmas. Brian's wife Deborah had left him the previous year, claiming she needed space. We spent the holiday together as a family should. However, I noticed how Catherine touched his arm when she laughed at his jokes, how their eyes lingered a moment too long when they believed I wasn't watching. I dismissed it, telling myself it was nothing. Brian had been my friend for 15 years. You don't discard that over a mere hunch. Then came the missed calls on Catherine's phone from Susan, at odd hours. The new perfume she started wearing to book club. The way she'd jump when I entered a room while she was texting. Brian began inventing reasons to visit our house while I was still at job sites, offering to assist Catherine with the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, dropping off documents that could easily have been emailed. I remained silent, working late to secure our future, to expand the business we had painstakingly built. Every man has blind spots when it comes to the people they trust most. Brian's betrayal was staring me in the face, and still, I looked away until I could no longer do so. Everything imploded on a Tuesday evening in April. I finished early at the Miller site. We'd finally landed the contract, and decided to surprise Catherine by returning home for dinner, instead of grabbing takeout. I stopped to buy a bottle of her favorite wine, hoping to reconnect, to perhaps mend whatever was tearing us apart. The house was eerily quiet when I arrived, too quiet for 7 in the evening. Catherine's car was in the driveway, but she wasn't in the kitchen or living room. I placed the wine on the counter, noticing her phone next to the sink, its screen illuminated by an incoming message. I'd never been one to check my wife's phone. I'd never needed to. But something about the timing, the silence in the house, the knot in my gut that had grown too large to ignore. My hand moved before I could second-guess myself. The message was from Brian. Left my jacket upstairs. Don't tell Grant I stopped by. My body went cold, not with shock, but with a chilling certainty, like the final tumblers of a lock clicking into place. I ascended the stairs slowly, each step measured, listening intently. The master bedroom door was ajar. I pushed it open further, and found Catherine sitting on the edge of our bed, holding Brian's leather jacket, the one I'd gifted him for his 50th birthday. She looked up, saw me standing there, and the color drained from her face. "Grant," she whispered, the single word hanging heavy in the air between us. I held up her phone, its screen still lit. He left his jacket. She didn't deny it, didn't attempt to fabricate some story about helping him with paperwork or planning a surprise party for me. She simply sat there, her shoulders slumped, still clutching his jacket. "You're always working late," she finally said, her gaze fixed on the floor. He was there for me. I nodded slowly, feeling strangely calm. "I understand. I just need some time to process this." I turned and walked downstairs, retrieving my keys from the hook by the door. I drove to the deserted Redwood office, and sat at my desk in the darkness, staring blankly ahead. It wasn't just the betrayal by my wife. It was Brian. 15 years of friendship. 15 years of unwavering trust. The man who had helped me build everything I possessed, now attempting to seize the most precious part of my life. I took out my desk drawer, the top-shelf whiskey we'd opened that very morning to celebrate securing the Miller contract, and poured myself a generous measure. I didn't drink it. I simply stared at the amber liquid, catching the faint light from the parking lot outside. By midnight, the whiskey remained untouched, but something had hardened within me. The pain was still present, a physical ache in my chest, but it was being walled off by something colder, more resolute. I had spent my life building things, equipment fleets, a company, a marriage. Now I was going to dismantle something, piece by meticulous piece. I retrieved my phone and dialed my lawyer's private number. I gave Catherine precisely 3 days of space. I remained in the guest room, refraining from questioning her whereabouts during the day or her conversations when her phone rang. I was cordial, distant, processing, exactly how a stunned husband should behave. What she didn't see was what transpired during business hours. The morning after discovering Brian's jacket, I met with David Miller, the corporate attorney who had assisted in structuring Redwood Construction when we first incorporated. We sat in his downtown office, the blinds partially drawn against the spring sunshine. "You want to invoke Article 7? He asked, his eyebrows raised. It wasn't a question. Yes. Article 7 was my safeguard. When Brian and I formalized his investment 15 years prior, David had suggested including a clause that would protect the company if either partner engaged in actions that could damage its reputation. At the time, I had envisioned scenarios such as gambling debts or DUIs, things that could alienate clients in our conservative industry. I never anticipated needing it, because my partner was sleeping with my wife. "It will necessitate buying him out at predetermined rates," David warned. 20 cents on the dollar of the current valuation. I nodded. "I'm aware. And you have proof." I slid my phone across the desk, displaying the text messages I had downloaded from Catherine's phone while she slept. The GPS history showing Brian's truck parked at our house during work hours when I was at job sites, and the emails I discovered when I finally checked her laptop. David scrolled through the evidence, his expression remaining professionally neutral. "This will become messy, Grant. It already is." 2 days later, the legal documents were prepared. I called Brian and requested a meeting at the office after hours, stating that I needed to discuss the Miller project expansion. He arrived looking precisely as he always did. Flannel shirt, work jeans, that leather birthday jacket, like a man with nothing to conceal, like my friend. "Hey buddy," he said, settling into the chair opposite my desk. "What's so urgent it couldn't wait until morning?" I slid the folder across to him. "Article 7 dissolution papers. I'm buying out your shares." His face shifted from bewildered confusion to shocked disbelief, to simmering anger as he flipped through the documents. "What in the world is this? Article 7. Actions detrimental to the company's reputation. Where is this coming from?" I maintained a steady voice. You know exactly where it's coming from, Brian. Is this about Catherine? He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if we were conspirators. Look, I know things haven't been ideal between you two. She's been lonely, man. It just happened. 15 years of friendship and that's your explanation? It just happened. He ran a hand through his hair. You've been absent, Grant. Working all the time building this precious company. When was the last time you actually listened to her? Actually showed up? His voice took on a self-righteous tone. You drove her right to me. I almost laughed. So it's my fault. I'm not signing this, he said, pushing the folder back. You can't force me out over a personal matter. Actually, I can. Section 3. Paragraph 2. Read it. He glanced down, reading the fine print he'd signed 15 years ago without a second thought. His face darkened. You'd do this to me. After everything we've built together. You did this to us, I corrected. I'm simply adhering to the contract. Brian stood up, knocking back his chair. Catherine won't stand for this. She'll back me up. I simply nodded. You should call her. He pulled out his phone, his fingers furiously jabbing at the screen as he stormed out. I sat back in my chair, waiting for the next domino to fall. The following morning, Brian appeared at my house. I was in the kitchen making coffee when he burst through the front door as if he owned the place. Perhaps in his mind, he believed he did. What did you say to her? He demanded. His face flushed with anger. I took my time pouring the coffee. Who? Catherine. She's not answering my calls. Her sister said she left town yesterday. That was news to me. I had given her space. I hadn't tracked her movements. But I maintained a neutral expression as I sipped my coffee. Perhaps she needed time to reflect. Brian slammed his palm on the counter. Don't play games. You threatened her, didn't you? Made her choose between me and your money. I carefully set down my mug. I didn't have to threaten anyone, Brian. I showed her the same paperwork I showed you. The dissolution of our partnership. And I showed her the prenuptial agreement she signed when we got married. The one with the infidelity clause. His face went slack. What infidelity clause? The one that states if either party commits adultery, they forfeit all rights to community property acquired during the marriage, including ownership stake in Redwood Construction. This was the element Brian had never known about. When Catherine and I married, her parents had insisted on a prenuptial agreement to protect their family's assets. I had agreed, but I added my own stipulations. We both signed it, then filed it away, never expecting to need it. You're lying, Brian said, but his voice lacked conviction. I walked to my home office, unlocked the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, and retrieved a folder. It contained the original prenuptial agreement with both our signatures, along with the amendment clarifying the infidelity clause. Brian read it, then looked up at me with an expression of stunned awe. You've been planning this for 15 years. No, I said honestly. I've been protecting what's mine for 15 years. There's a difference. He sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him. So that's it? You strip us both of everything? Not everything, I corrected. Just what you took from me. But there was more Brian didn't know. While he had been busy destroying our friendship and my marriage, I had been reviewing all of Redwood's client contracts. Most had been signed with my personal guarantee, not the company's. The clients were loyal to me, not to our logo. I had also uncovered something that turned my stomach. Going through the company's financial records, I found minor discrepancies. Equipment rentals billed to projects that never used them. Expense accounts that didn't match receipts. Vendor payments that seemed inflated. All managed by Brian. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out another folder. The audit of your expense accounts for the past 3 years. Brian's eyes widened. Grant, that's not what? Not embezzlement. Because the accountant says it looks exactly like embezzlement. $173,000 worth. The blood drained from his face. It was temporary. I was about to put it back. With what money? Your divorce cleaned you out 2 years ago. I needed it for Deborah's settlement, he admitted. Then for the down payment on the new house. Then to impress. He trailed off. To impress my wife, I finished for him. He stared at the floor. What are you going to do? I closed the folder. That depends on whether you sign the dissolution papers. Sign. And this audit never sees the light of day. Fight me, and I'll take this to the district attorney. Brian looked at me for a long moment. You've thought of everything, haven't you? No, I said quietly. I never thought I'd have to think of this. Plan in motion. 600 words. I gave Brian 24 hours to sign the papers. He did it in 12. By the end of the week, his 15% stake in Redwood Construction belonged to me at 20 cents on the dollar, a fraction of its true worth, after we'd landed the Miller contract. What he didn't know was that I had already contacted Miller Construction. I had personally guaranteed our performance on their project, assuring them that the internal restructuring at Redwood wouldn't affect their timeline or quality. Old man Miller himself had clapped me on the shoulder and said, "We always knew we were hiring you, Grant, not your company." While Brian was cleaning out his office, I was meeting with our 3 other major clients, securing their business with personal handshakes and revised contracts. By the time he had finished packing his photos and coffee mug, I had locked down 80% of our annual revenue with ironclad agreements that followed me, not the Redwood name. Catherine returned after a week at her sister's place in Portland. I was in the backyard splitting firewood when her car pulled into the driveway. She approached cautiously, as if testing thin ice. "We need to talk," she said. I set down the axe. About us. About what happens next. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. She'd been practicing this conversation. "I've already filed the divorce papers," I said. "Your copy is on the kitchen counter." She blinked, thrown off her prepared script. "Just like that. 15 years of marriage, and you're throwing it away without even trying to fix things." The irony almost made me laugh. "Almost. You already made that decision," I said, picking up another log. "I'm just handling the paperwork." "You." "Ron, people make mistakes. Marriages recover from affairs all the time." I lined up the axe. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. We made it every day for months. I brought the axe down, splitting the log cleanly in 2. "You." The crack echoed across the yard. "What about the house?" she asked, shifting to practical matters now that the emotional appeal had failed. "And your retirement accounts?" "My lawyer says I'm entitled to half of everything." I set the axe down again, and faced her directly. "You." "Lawyer should read your prenup more carefully. Specifically the infidelity clause." Her face went pale. "That old thing, we signed that 20 years ago." "It can't possibly." "It can and it does," I said, cutting her off. "But I'm not leaving you with nothing. You'll get the vacation cabin and a settlement, enough to start over, not enough to share with Brian." Her eyes widened. "You." "Brian, what does he have to do with the divorce?" "Yeah." "Nothing anymore. He's been bought out of Redwood. The money he embezzled is being repaid through the sale of his shares." She sat down heavily on the garden bench. "Embezzled? What are you talking about?" I realized then that she didn't know. Brian had been stealing to maintain the lifestyle that impressed her, to afford the gifts, dinners, and weekend getaways, betraying not just me but her expectations as well. "Ask him yourself," I said, picking up the axe again, "though I doubt he'll take your call now that he's lost his golden goose." She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Perhaps she was. The man who would have forgiven her anything, who would have worked himself to death to give her everything. That man died the night I found Brian's jacket on our bed. "Who are you?" she whispered. I split another log. "Someone who's done carrying people who plan on dropping me." 6 weeks after finding Brian's jacket, I sat in a conference room at Summit Stone Limited, the second largest construction company in southern Idaho. Across from me were their CEO Albert Riley and their lead counsel. Between us lay a stack of papers, the acquisition agreement for Redwood Construction. "One last chance to reconsider, Grant," Albert said. "Once you sign, there's no turning back." I reached for the pen. I'm not the one who'll be having regrets. The plan had come together almost by accident. 2 weeks after forcing Brian out, I'd received a call from Albert. Summit Stone had been trying to expand their heavy equipment division for years. With the Miller contract secured, and my company's reputation stronger than ever, the timing was perfect. I could have said no. I could have continued building Redwood myself, but the company had become tainted, a daily reminder of betrayal. I needed a clean break, a fresh start. So I'd made a deal. Summit Stone would acquire Redwood Construction for twice its market value, with the condition that I remain as division president for 2 years, bringing my client relationships and expertise with me. After that I would be free to retire or embark on something new. I signed my name on the final page, sliding the contract back across the table. Albert's secretary appeared at the door. Mr. Riley, there's someone here to see Mr. Mitchell. A Mr. Miller. Albert looked at me. I nodded. Brian walked in, his face tight with barely controlled rage. You sold the company without even offering me the chance to buy back in? I stood, extending my hand to Albert. Thank you for your time. I look forward to our partnership. As the Summit Stone executives departed, I finally turned to Brian. You're right. I sold it. For $17 million. His mouth fell open. 17? But my shares were worth about $600,000 at the time. You sold them back to me. For $120,000. The magnitude of what he'd lost hit him all at once. You son of a... I'd be careful with the next words out of your mouth, I said quietly. You're standing on very thin ice as it is. Brian's fists clenched at his sides. This isn't over. Actually, I said, collecting my copy of the contract. It is. 1 year later, I stood on the deck of my new cabin, overlooking the Snake River. Not the vacation place Catherine received in the divorce. A new one, larger, with a workshop out back where I was restoring a 1967 Triumph Bonneville I'd coveted since I was 19. The divorce had been finalized for 9 months. The settlement was precisely what I'd offered her initially. Fair, but not generous. She'd accepted it without a fight, once her lawyer confirmed the prenuptial agreement would hold up in court. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she and Brian had attempted to make a go of it for a few months before it imploded. He couldn't maintain the lifestyle she expected, not after losing his stake in Redwood and having his reputation tarnished within our industry. Last I heard, she had moved to Seattle. Attempting a fresh start, Brian fared worse. After our confrontation at Summit Stone, he'd tried to launch his own equipment rental business, targeting the same clients we'd cultivated relationships with over the years. Word had spread about his departure from Redwood, about the accounting irregularities during his tenure. No one would touch him. He'd ended up taking a salaried position with a small firm in Montana, a significant step down for a man who had once owned a portion of the largest equipment contractor in southern Idaho. I took a sip of my coffee, watching a bald eagle soar over the river. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from David, my son. He was coming home for the weekend, and wanted to know if I was free for dinner. I texted back, always free for you. At 59, I wasn't where I'd envisioned being at this stage of my life. My marriage was over. My best friend was a stranger. The company I'd built was in someone else's hands, even if I still oversaw its day-to-day operations. But I was standing on my own deck, breathing the crisp mountain air, with my son still in my life, and $17 million in investments working diligently for me. I had shed what wasn't genuine, and retained what truly mattered. Some men spend their entire lives learning whom they can trust. I learned it in one brutal, expensive night, a lesson worth every penny.